Well, I'm here with Iain Morrison. Hi, Iain.
Hi,
how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
It's so good to have you here on this side of the Atlantic.
Well, long may it be a possibility.
And I also, of course, want to reintroduce Laynie Browne, who's joined us. Hi, Laynie. Before we talk about this poem by Emily Dickinson, do you mind, Iain, just briefly saying what your relationship with Emily Dickinson is, and why would a Scottish poet, contemporary Scottish poet, be interested in Dickinson?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Yeah.
You went bigger than I thought you were going to go there. I can tell you what I've done. Can I tell you why I've done it? I don't know. So why did I love Emily Dickinson so much? Oh, I can tell you why, actually. So I had a really inspirational high school teacher who's a poet called Henry Marsh. He's still active in Scotland. And he taught us Emily Dickinson, and it was like suddenly I found the kind of use of language that I was most excited about that hadn't come into the classroom before. And I specifically remember it was this poem that I then spent years looking for again afterwards, until I found how you can look up Emily Dickinson poems. Bloom upon a mountain, stated blameless of a name, which came up in the reading that I did yesterday, because then after squirreling away this love of Dickinson, when I later had the chance, I put together a performance where I read all of Emily Dickinson's poems over a number of days. 5 is the longest I've done so far, because I couldn't think of any other structure that would give me the excuse to spend that time with Emily Dickinson's work. I was like, I'm just going to have to create the structure that is doing that. And then, of course, like, as I've been writing my own poetry, that's just fed and nurtured me in so many ways, and she pops out through the work that I do in loads of different unexpected ways.
Can I take a stab? This is totally unscripted because we're here to talk about a particular poem. Can I take a stab at why a Scottish poet might be interested in Dickinson above all?
I'd be interested to know.
Okay, I'm going to try it out, and you'll tell me if I'm way off.
I wonder if I know what you're going to
say.
You want to guess what I'm going to say? This is so weird.
Are you going to go ballads?
Yeah, I think I want to go ballads. I think that the Scottish poetry tradition, which modern and contemporary Scottish poets, like anybody else, have to spend some time breaking away from because of its predictableness and its fealty to a lot of things that go along with metricality and rhyme, various oppressive things. On the other hand, Dickinson is a model of a poet who quirkily uses the ballad to do all kinds of violating of those rules.
For sure.
This is, you know,
quirkily violating.
Quirkily violating, and you know, Helen Adam, who's Scottish by birth, you know, does another version of that. But Dickinson is a little easier to do 5 days of than So is that, how did I do? That is a thing that Scottish poets might be interested in.
I've just never thought about that.
Okay, but I guess it can't be true then.
No, but that it might be a deeper truth than I'm conscious of, because I suppose, like, if you're a Scottish poet, and we've had lots of discussions about this, you kind of go in lots of different directions trying to work out where your, you know, compass points are.
Yeah.
Because of the relationship between the Scottish native languages and English, and because of the fact that we often look for our poetry peers overseas, you know, hence the fact that I've been listening to your podcast for 12 years. So maybe actually we run away from the ballad to start with, and then we find our way back to it. But for me, it's the abstraction in the language and the ambiguity. That's what I love. I love multiple possibilities.
Well, speaking of ambiguity, we have a poem sometimes called Revolution is the Pod, which could be a slogan from 1968, actually. Revolution is the pod! Well, talk about opaque. But we're going to ask you to read it, Iain, and then we'll talk about it. But speaking of ballad, you know, the last stanza. Left inactive on the stalk, all its purple fled, revolution shakes it for, test if it be dead. You know, so there you go, the ballad. Okay, would you read it and then we'll talk about it?
Absolutely, yes. Revolution is the pod systems rattle from. When the winds of will are stirred, excellent is bloom. But, except its russet base, every summer be the entomber of itself, so of liberty, left inactive on the stalk, all its purple fled, revolution shakes it for test if it be dead.
Laynie, start us off. Revolution seems to be a metaphor for what happens in nature. But of course, when you start a poem with the word revolution and you use the word liberty in it, clearly there's some political reference. Can you do something with the nature and the politics?
Yeah, so I mean, I think of the garden first, but the garden as a metaphor for growth and regeneration, which is also important in thinking about humans and their living situations and how they relate to each other or how they don't. Mm-hmm. So what is concealed in the pod, isolation, seclusion, elitism, the unknown, it has to get out.
Mm-hmm. So the pod in revolutionary rhetoric is the sectarianism. And the use of systems rattle for a 19th century poet suggests maybe she didn't read Marx. Seems unlikely, but I don't know. Maybe Dickinson did, but doubtful, right? But systems rattling is either a serious use of 19th century revolutionary rhetoric, or it could be a light, I know how this sounds, slight mock. So can you help us, Iain, with systems rattle? It really sounds like, the times they are a-changin'.
Yeah. I hear the sound of a seed pod. Because, first of all, I want to clarify that pod is a difficult word for an English speaker because we don't use pod the way that you use it in America. I had to look up to find out what Emily Dickinson thought a pod was. For us, a pod is like a space shuttle or an escape pod or something,
Oh, so it's a space age word. It's because it's a very old word. For us.
So that, I guess
refers to something you'll find on a stalk.
Yeah, I guess it maybe survived longer you might talk about a bean pod or a pea pod.
That's
peas
what
in
it
a
is.
pod.
Yeah, peas in a pod.
Maybe you're just too urban.
Maybe I'm just too urban. Maybe, but it's not. I would talk about a seed case, but like the idea of a pod.
Seed case.
Yeah, and you talk about going into pod. We wouldn't talk about that because she talks about that in another.
Didn't you guys go to pod for
in
dinner?
COVID? Oh.
Yeah, that kind of pod. Yeah, we had. Yeah,
did.
We had bubbles. Anyway,
Bubbles.
bubbles.
Oh, so pandemic pods were not a thing.
No, it wasn't
pandemic
a thing for us. It was
Oh,
bubbles.
interesting.
Okay. Anyway, we're digressing.
We are digressing. Fun,
Okay.
but yeah. So,
Systems rattle.
But I hear the seed pod, like the rattling in it. So I'm getting literally like, you hear the thing that's growing that can erupt out of what's still encased. And what is the pod? Revolution is the pod, but is the pod also a kind of, container, an idea, a thought? Like, the minute you state something in language, it becomes a container of possibilities. And why is revolution the pod? That's the thing that I think I can see why the thought of revolution.
Well, what's the pod after all the winds have come? Presumably, this is, the end of the summer, the entombment of the summer. Let's say early fall.
Yeah.
Right. In New England, that comes pretty quickly. By October 1st, the only thing that's left after the winds have taken everything is the pod, which is a dead seed case.
So I just wonder why it's the pod and
So
why
that's
it's not
the revolution.
seeding.
The revolution is the thing that will come back alive.
Yeah, I guess
in an
I'm
almost
seeing
sci-fi sense.
Yeah, but it's like there's a sort of potential. It's the potential of revolution that she's talking about, and the idea of the testing that comes later. It's like, can it grow? Is it? I guess the revolution is always there, imminent, ready to seed.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's why in the 1950s in the U.S., every sci-fi movie which was an analog for communism or anti-communism had a pod in it. And the pod just sat there.
Like Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Bernadette's poem.
Bernadette wrestled with this.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Anytime you think, it's just a dead thing, and then that's the end of you once you...
Right, yeah, for sure.
So it's kind of either a revolutionary warning poem or a mock revolutionary warning poem. Laynie? Which is it?
Or both. I mean, when I read systems rattle, I think of upheaval and agitation, but I also think of a child raising a rattle and also a death rattle, a rattlesnake rattle, as, being from California.
I'm sure there was a time, pre-modern, when a pod was pulled and used as a baby rattle.
Yeah.
Right.
Why not, right?
Yeah.
All right, so where are we? So the russet is a reference to the plant, probably potato. Or is that the color? Is it a red?
It's a color.
I took it as the color.
A rusty
Yeah.
red.
I took it as blood. So,
Oh, okay, so blood is flowing in the fields and the streets after the revolution.
Yeah.
But really it's still an ongoing allegory about agriculture.
Yeah, both. Yes, yeah.
So is there a message to revolutionists in the idea that every summer is naturally going to be an entomber of itself? Good luck being a revolutionist, because the seasons simply turn.
Isn't there echoes of Shelley and Ode to the Wind, West Wind and Revolution?
So it would seem. And Shelley, that's a revolutionary poem. But I think this is an anti-revolutionary poem.
Say more. What do you mean?
Ha ha, you revolutionists. Just look at the stalks. The seasons go round. And don't worry, it'll come back.
That's so interesting because, I think of it as being, well, either neutral or leaning towards pro-revolution, because I think she's celebrating, or at least noting, the generative nature of
Pods.
Nature and and recognizing that if it's there in nature, inevitably it's there in structures of society.
Well, what does revolution do at the end? It takes the stalk, it takes the pod, and shakes it for test, if it be dead, to see if
there's room for
it's going to be a potential for change.
Yeah, or I think.
But that's what revolution does. It checks to see if there's any potential life in the deadness.
Yeah, but I think it's shaking liberty on the stalk to check whether those freedoms have died and is there opportunity for another system to come through and supplant it.
I'm reading it as regeneration because what you do, and you're a gardener, you take the seed pod and you harvest the seeds and then you plant them. But the poem is more about the wind. If the wind blows and the pod is crushed and the seeds are scattered, so some system is crushed and then regeneration happens. That's what we need for change.
Well, this is the one time in Dickinson that I want to pause the camera and have us spend a month in the archive trying to understand the two kinds of rhetoric about revolution in the 19th century. We will not pause the camera. We will stay right here. We're not pausing. We're staying right here. But if we were, we would encounter two kinds of revolutionary rhetoric. There is the revolutionary rhetoric that might be called, this is the end of, a human epoch, right? And things are going to change, and we're going to unleash freedom. And everything that was already here is going to be wiped out, all the systems made. And that's one kind of revolutionary rhetoric, which was emerging at the time this poetry was written. But then there's the kind of sweet ode to the west wind, romantic, sign me up for the freshness renewal. And that still follows the natural cycle, which suggests that it's only as revolutionary as the plants coming up again in the next spring.
But isn't it a miracle every time they come up?
It's a miracle, but is it a revolution?
I think it's a question mark.
Systems rattling?
No, I think that what she's asking, are there any seeds in the pod? So it can be maybe a both and. Emily
Dickinson, the poet, is not the one checking it. It's the revolution that's checking it to see if there's anything in the pod.
Yeah, so she was, and this is one of the reasons I'm excited to share this discussion with Americans, because you can bring an understanding of Emily Dickinson's political moment, where I think this poem was just after the American Civil War, I think. So you will understand things that I don't about the context for that. But I'm getting stuff around royalty, purple, the royal colour. For me, the purple fled. I'm seeing an armed forces withdrawing. Or maybe it's earlier, maybe it's the British being vanquished. You know, there's all of that.
That's great.
There.
That's not Civil War stuff.
No, I know that's
something
going
else.
back, yeah. But I think there's definitely a royal thing, and liberty, I guess, was already a very important word for Americans. I don't know when that became like.
We got it from the French.
Yeah.
In the 18th
So the
century.
equality and fraternity, yeah. So it's there, and I literally just think it's really looking at. I feel like it's Emily Dickinson asking, what's the value of human death? Like, you know, what can come out? I really think the russet base is just this blood. It's like if there's no, or if that's a metaphor at one remove, you know, it could be blood as a sense of blood, sweat and tears, that, you know, without efforts, if you're not defending your liberty, then along will come the revolution and shake your complacent attitudes towards your previously fought for or inherited freedoms, and they'll be taken away. Is that chiming, or do you think I'm going too bloodthirsty with it? Or?
No, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, when I said at the very beginning, "Revolution is the pod" is a wonderful 1968 slogan. Let me elaborate a little on that, because Emily Dickinson would never use such a slogan without irony. That kind of slogan. So if we were to take Emily out of the 19th century, post-Civil War, and put her in 1968, there would be two kinds of revolutionary rhetoric that she might sign up for. One would be, you know, power to the people, revolution is the pod, everything will be remade. All systems will be remade. The system is corrupt. It will never regenerate on its own. And then there are the Gardner back to nature, counterculture people who, this is really a binarism, but I'm just
I'm interested.
thinking about the 60s. And, you know, all this talk about blood running in the streets, the heat of the summer night, all that stuff, in the end, it has to give way to a cycle of attitudes and values. And I think she would be on the latter end of thinking about renewal, and she would look to nature unironically as a cue for what happens next.
But why does she have to have a position on it? Which one should we go for? What if she's observing and thinking about the reports that have been coming back into Amherst and the, you know, like, you know, maybe it's a, I mean, and it's, I feel like I'm sorry, I things to say. It's also one of those poems that, like, we talked a little bit previously about, where she does a definition. And I think she loves poems that start with X is such and such. You know,
that would be the
exaltation
opening.
is the going of the inland sea.
Right, and then excellent is bloom.
Yeah, so there's a kind of, I don't get it as her pinning her colours to the mast. I think it's more like, oh, let me think about what revolution is, and she really wants to get to the isness of it.
Laynie?
Well, I think there's a lot in the second stanza kind of hinging on this question, and I read it as it's apocalyptic if the pod is not destroyed. Summer would be the end of human life. So then what is liberty? There's no liberty without this almost, you know, violent death of the pod.
But every summer, not just this particular revolutionary summer, but no matter whether there's a revolution or not, every summer attempts to take the life that has preceded it seasonally and push it into dormancy, and somehow, some way, it will renew.
Yeah, but it wouldn't come back without the system. Like, you know,
Nature's system
yeah,
of checking.
I read that as saying that if it wasn't for, well, the russet base or something feeding or germinating the seeds, then that's it. We're done. If there's no cyclicality, if that's a word, then every summer that's it. Well, because there was just one summer and it would stop.
Let's go around for final thoughts on this one. I think I'll start and wish that we could be transported by a time machine back to maybe an Amherst College Marxist, some student of Marxism or some student of the revolutionary moment, and then walk over to Emily's house and sit in the parlor and hear them have a conversation about this. She is expert at adopting the language of that moment. You see it all here, right? The systems, the reference to liberty, the shaking, revolution shakes, right? All that stuff. She's really listening closely to the revolutionary rhetoric of her time. For me, the question is she playing with it, as we know she's capable of doing as a person who loves language and who's got her ear to the ground? I think that's what she's doing. She's playing with it. I don't think she wants to go very deep into the social significance of it. I think she wants to go really deep into the possibilities of the analogy to nature. Anyway, that's my final thought. Laynie, do you have one?
Yeah, I was just musing on how the first line, revolution is the pod, contains the entire impulse of the poem, just like the pod contains the seeds, which must be released to ensure the new growth. And the pod is not a beautiful thing like the flower, and the seeds are kind of invisible. And I also wonder if the question that she's posing is, does humanity have the capacity to do it right now, to regenerate right now?
She's asking the question.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, that helps me to understand how to locate it, I think, and what she might be having to do psychically at that moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Iain, your final thought?
I'm going to go language. I love the way that she's really paring back and chucking out some of the words that you would expect. Like, I like excellent is bloom. I like that it's, yeah, excellent is bloom. Yeah.
What kind of sentence is that?
Yeah, yes, excellent.
Excellent is bloom.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, she spends so much time writing about flowers, and in this poem, she's like, who cares about the flowers? It's just for show.
Think about the fabulous grammar of that. You would say blooms are excellent.
Yeah.
Blooming is
Yes.
excellent. The state of blooming is excellent.
Right.
But excellent is bloom. It's almost German in the way it's reversing its subject and object or something.
Yeah. So I
like it a lot.
I love it.
And it's just the way it sort of makes you have to think about where the, which clauses belong with which. It took me a while to work out that I think sow of liberty is the bit that carries on into the thing that's left inactive on the stalk. Because you could read that as left inactive on the stalk, all its purple fled, revolution shakes it. But it isn't revolution that's being talked about. The thing that's left inactive on the stalk is the liberty. But you have to work, riddle it a bit. And my last language thought question is, for test if it be dead, is that an idiom? Because again, test, to check if it's dead or not. Yeah, for test.
Test is a regular verb, to check.
Yeah,
but
for
not that
test.
That syntax.
Yeah.
We wouldn't say for check.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
or for test.
Test.
Yeah, or for testing.
Or so that might be a noun, testing, for testing. Shakes it so it can be tested. Yeah, so she's really messing around here.
She pushes it, and this is my absolute favourite thing about Emily Dickinson, the way that she just almost lets the language fall apart, and you can resolve it through your reading, but you can often resolve it in a few different ways. And sometimes, if you're lucky, one might lock into place, and you're like, I think I've got.
Or often you can't ever resolve it.
Yeah,
but
you
you
can't ever
keep
resolve
coming
it.
up with possibilities.
Yeah.
Yes, and also, she's more typically going to have her second and fourth line quatrain rhymes work fine at the beginning and fall apart at the end. In this case, the first, second, and fourth line doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
Systems rattle from.
Yeah.
We wouldn't say from.
No.
Nobody would. Systems rattle from when the winds of will are stirred. Excellent is bloom. So the second line, fourth line rhyme in the first stanza is not only excellent is bloom, is not only a contorted line, which you think she might be using in order to get the rhyme, but she used it in order to get to a rhyme that doesn't work.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah, she's amazing. Iain, thank you so much for selecting this poem. Why'd you select it?
Because it leapt out at me when I was doing the durational reading, when I did it in Berlin, and it was one that I just knew I wanted to think about, and I was like, this is one I want to spend time with.
How funny, Laynie, that we have this friend here who, let the record show, you mentioned this, but I'm going to spell it out, occasionally performs much of, all of, most of, a huge selection of Emily Dickinson poems in a performative setting. Did it here, it's available as a video. Did it here yesterday, the day before we're filming, behind some screens and muslin and all this stuff in a Dickinsonian getup, right? And I can just imagine you, Iain, reading a bunch of poems, some of which you know well and a lot of them you don't, and reading them, but knowing you have to perform one after the other and cannot stop and say, what the hell is this Revolution is the Pod poem that I just read?
Yeah.
So here you are reading the next poem and you can't get your mind off of this one.
I think you made a pod of revolution in your durational piece.
Do you think?
I think so.
What then?
Because, well, most of us don't experience durational art every single day. I wish it were more often, but every time that I do, it is revolutionary. It was revolutionary in my hearing Dickinson's language, in your voice and cadence, and all the light and air in between. And it made me want to just live in that space longer.
Thank you. And I think that's the best feedback I could have had, because to gather the seeds that maybe haven't had the chance to germinate, for me, that's the reason to read the whole of Dickinson, because there's so many more than have become the canonized ones. And I love that you guys are digging into the deeper ones with your teaching in the course here.
Oh my goodness, praise all around.
Yeah.
And that's revolutionary. Right?
It is, yeah.
And if we were to shake the pod of that space yesterday, because that's what you're referring to, the pod of the durational reading as a performance.
And the literal space that he made with paper and
the space,
words.
if we were to shake it to test if it be dead, we would find out that it's not dead, because it will engender a whole other set of readings, including people responding to this one. And so we will end. Thank you, Laynie. Thank you.
Maybe can I say one tiny little extra thing? Just, I think that's the feeling I have, that I wanted to see how she connected to the now, and maybe that's why I'm so excited to find a poem that feels like it can speak to the political now, regardless of where she was going with. And I think that, for me, is the next thing for Dickinson. We've had the queer reclamation, we've had the feminist reclamation. I think maybe there's a kind of reality reclamation of Dickinson that's coming, where we're going to start getting towards readings that are more engaged with the nuts and bolts of history.
Well, this is really optimistic of you, because after first reclamation, feminist would be first, right? Then queer would be next, and so forth. And then there's a textual reclamation and a manuscript, so forth. But if we're good, if everything is okay, hunky-dory, we'll get more reclamation. But there's also the chance that it will be unreclamated, because, you know, the forces of standardization and of quatrain perfection and all that stuff are still out there.
No, it's going to happen.
Not Kelly Writer's House.
That's right.
You never know. Come back in 30 years and the Writer's House might be, you know, a serious quatrain house. We'll see.
I doubt it.
Let's hope not.
You've not planted that seed.
Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.